Good morning students. Today we are going to see grammar topic, active voice and passive voice. Okay. So first I'll tell you what is a voice. Active voice and passive voice means this is a topic which generally deals with the main component of this is verb. Okay. There are 5 forms of verb and one of the form is voice. So whenever we talk about active voice and passive voice, please understand or please always remember that we are going to deal mainly with verb. Okay. So it is one of the forms of verb. Okay. Now what is meant by a voice, or why there is a separate topic called as voice? Voice means, see, in a sentence, okay, in your lower classes or in your earlier classes you would have learnt about parts of speech, and also in your 7th or 8th standard you would have learnt about sentence pattern. So when you recall parts of speech, you would have come across something called as noun, okay, noun and verb. Clear? Now what is meant by a noun? We know it is a naming word. Okay. Under noun only we have person, things and animals. What is meant by a verb? Verb is nothing but it is an action word which denotes what action is being done. Okay. So these are the 2 important components that you have to remember when you learn active voice and passive voice. Okay. Now what is meant by a voice? Okay. Now this noun I told you, it refers to person, place or animals or things. Okay. So in that case it refers both to person, things and animals. So this noun only in sentence pattern it comes as subject and object. Clear? Now this verb I told you it is an action word. Now why am I again and again telling about this noun and verb is that is the main thing you learn in voice, that is active voice or passive voice. Voice means in a sentence, any sentence or every sentence in English or any language, it will have subject and verb. Okay. In that sentence, if the subject is doing the action, okay, if the subject is doing the action, in certain sentences the subject will do the action, in certain sentences the subject will receive the action. So in order to differentiate these 2 only, we have something called as voice. So voice is something which denotes whether the subject is doing the action or whether the subject is receiving the action. So voice is basically a tense form which shows what? Which shows whether the subject of the given sentence is doer of the action or receiver of the action. This is the main difference we learn in voice. Okay, just to know whether the subject is doing the action or receiving the action, we have something called as voice, and this is mainly denoted by the verb form. Okay, okay. Sorry, not tense form, verb form. Okay. Now we have 2 kinds of voices. One is active voice and the other one is passive voice. Okay. Now active voice, when do you call a sentence is in active voice? Okay. Okay. If in that sentence, if the subject of a given sentence is the doer of the action, then we call that sentence is in active voice. Okay. Or we say that the sentence is in active voice. Passive voice, definitely the other thing. Voice means only 2 things, whether the subject is doing the action or receiving the action. If the subject is doing the action, then we call that sentence, we say that the sentence is in active voice. If the subject is receiving the action, then we say that the sentence is in passive voice. This is the main thing you have to know about voice and the difference between active voice and passive voice. Sometimes there will be certain situation or context where we would like to, or where we have to give more importance to the noun which receives the action. So in that context or in that situation you can use passive voice, and otherwise in most cases it is better we use only active voice. Okay, so this is something about active and passive voice. Now, example, clear? He lights a candle. This is a very simple sentence. Okay, this is a very simple sentence, and this sentence is in active voice. Clear? AV means active voice, PV means passive voice. Okay, now what is the passive form of this sentence? A candle is lit by him. Please don't think that without explaining I am just writing the answer. This is just an example sentence. So, he lights a candle is active voice, a candle is lit by him is passive form. Okay. Now, what are the changes? See, I have changed from active voice to passive voice. Now, in doing that, what are the changes I have done? This he, I have changed it into him and I have taken it to the back. Then, candle, I have taken to the front or in the beginning of the sentence. This lights, no, I have changed its form into is lit. So, these are some of the changes we usually do while changing a sentence from active to passive. Okay. So, now how can you do these changes? There are certain steps you have to follow. Okay. So, now he lights a candle. Okay. Now, in this sentence, what is the action that is done? The action that is done is lighting a candle. Clear? So, the action is lighting. So, then any action word we call it as verb. So, we can name this word light as verb. Okay. Who is lighting a candle? He is lighting a candle. So, who is doing the action here? He is doing the action. So, if a person or a thing is doing the action, then we call that part of the sentence as subject. Clear? Now, on whom or on which the action is being done, the action is done to the candle. So, this noun is receiving the action. So, a noun which receives an action, we call it as object. Clear? And as I told you when I gave introduction about active voice, I told in active voice the subject does the action, or the subject is the doer of action, or the subject is doing the action. See, if you see in this sentence, the subject is he and he is only lighting the candle. So, the subject is doing the action. That is why we have named this sentence as active voice. Now, come to the second one, that is the answer, the passive form. A candle is lit by him. Now, if you see in this sentence, this is the subject. Clear? Here again, this is the verb. Here, this is the object. Is it clear? So, now a candle is lit by him. Candle is receiving the action. So, in a sentence, if the subject is receiving the action, then we call that sentence as passive voice. Is it clear? Okay. Now, while changing from active to passive, what is the first thing I did? I have interchanged subject and object. I have taken subject to the last and I have brought object to the front. So, the first thing you have to do is before you interchange, only if you are able to pattern or identify subject, verb and object, the next step you will be able to interchange subject and object. So, the first thing you have to do is you have to pattern the sentence subject, verb, object. See, these steps are only in the initial level, beginning level. Once you have become used to active voice and passive voice, as soon as you see the sentence, you will be able to write the answer. But in the beginning stage, okay, the starting stage, these steps may be or will be helpful for you. So, first you have to pattern them into subject, verb and object. Now, after you have patterned, the next thing you have to do is, you have to interchange. So, what is the thing you are interchanging? You are taking subject to to the object position and you're taking object to the subject position. Okay, you're taking subject to the object position and you're taking object to the subject position. So that is the interchange you are doing. Then the next thing, if you notice, we have introduced an extra word by, and this by we usually call it as preposition. So we have to add the preposition by in passive form. Okay, and finally we will come to the verb form. So if you see, this verb form has undergone certain change. That is what we have done. We have done some changes in the tense of the verb form. So this is the final part. So in the verb form, the tense form is changed. Clear? Now if you see in this example, you don't have any, you have pronoun. Clear? In the sentence also you have pronoun. See this he, it is a subject but it is actually a pronoun. So that pronoun is also changed. Clear? But these are the steps you have to follow in order to change or transform a sentence from active to passive voice. The first thing is, as soon as a sentence is given, you have to pattern the sentence into subject, verb and object. Once you have done it, you have to interchange the subject to object place and bring object to the subject position. Then after that, in the passive voice, you have to introduce this preposition by. Then finally, the verb form, according to the tense of the active voice, you have to change the verb form in the passive voice also. So these are some of the changes we usually do. Now there are certain things you have to remember, or not remember, we can also say it as you have to should know. Okay. Okay. So what are the things you have to know when changing from active to passive voice? So first of all, what is the first step we did? We have to pattern into subject, verb and object. So you should know what is a subject, what is a verb and what is an object. Clear? So now what is a subject? I told you, in a sentence, that is in active voice, if the noun, see in any sentence you will have noun. So in a given sentence, in case they are asking you to change from active voice to passive voice, in that sentence, if you see noun, if you should first of all know to identify noun. Noun is only, we divide it into subject and object. So in a given sentence, if the noun is doing the action, if the noun is doing the action, then we can name that noun as subject. Okay. Of course, you will have one more noun in the sentence. In the same sentence, if there is another noun and if that noun is receiving the action. Okay. If the noun is receiving the action, then you can identify it as object. And verb, of course, you all know very well, it is nothing but action word. It refers to action that is done. So now when I am explaining this point, I would like to emphasize here or to remind you that if the sentence that is you are asked to change from active voice to passive voice, no, if that sentence doesn't have an object, then you cannot change it into passive form. Clear? There are certain exceptional cases, but one important thing is you should see whether the sentence has object or whether the sentence can have object. If it can have object also, you can change it into passive voice. But if there is no object, or if it cannot have an object, you cannot change it into passive voice. Clear? So that is what we call it as transitive verb and intransitive verb. What is transitive verb and what is intransitive verb? Transitive verbs are verbs which will have object and which can have object, whereas intransitive verbs are verbs which do not have object or which cannot have object. For example, I bought a pen. Okay, now in this sentence bought is a verb. Okay, now this verb, it has an object. Okay, it has an object. I bought a pen. So now just because this verb has an object, this verb can be said to be a transitive verb. Now the same sentence I can write it in a different way. I bought yesterday. See, this verb can have an object, but if you see in this sentence, it does not have a verb, sorry, it does not have an object. So in this sentence, this verb is intransitive verb, whereas in this sentence, this verb is transitive verb. What is meant by transitive verb? Transitive verb, if it has an object, we call it as a transitive verb. If it does not have an object, we call it as an intransitive verb. And please remember, while you pattern the sentence, the first step to change from active voice to passive voice is to pattern the sentence into subject, verb and object. So when you pattern the sentence itself, if you see there is object in the given sentence, then you can go for the next step. That is, you can go for interchanging, because only if there is object, you can change that given active voice into passive voice. If there is no object, then you cannot passivize the sentence. That is the first rule. Okay, so the first thing you should know before you change a sentence into active voice to passive voices, you should know what is a subject, you should know what is a verb, and you should know what is an object. Subject is in a given sentence. See, subject and object both are nothing but they are noun. Okay, in a given sentence you should have two nouns. If that noun is doing the action, you can name it as subject. If the noun is receiving the action, you can name that noun as object. If there is no object in the sentence, then that sentence cannot be changed into passive voice. Okay, so if the sentence has an object, then the verb of that sentence is called as transitive verb. If the sentence does not have an object, then the verb of that sentence is called as intransitive verb. Please remember, I am telling you again, if there is no object in the sentence, you cannot change the given sentence into passive form. Sometimes there will not be object in the sentence, but you can substitute with some false objects. So in that case, you can change it into passive voice, but there are certain sentences which will not have object and which cannot have object also. So those sentences cannot be changed into passive voice. And the second thing you have to do is, you should know is verb form. Okay, so you should know the basic verb forms, because if you see here, this light is changed into is lit. Clear? So this light, it is in the present form of the verb, simple present form of the verb. Okay, we usually call it as V1 form. Now if you see this lit, no, it is there in the past participle form of the verb, that is V3 form of the verb. So only if you know what is the past participle form of this verb, you can write the answer. So for this reason, you should all know the verb forms. We have, see, present form we have, then past form we have, past participle form we have. Clear? Then finally you have present participle. So only if you know all these verb forms, the different forms of verbs, you will be able to write the answer. I will give you certain examples. Example, see, our example here is, the word is light. Okay, so I will take that itself. So light, if it is singular, we use yes. If it is plural, we use light only. Okay, he lights, that is what I have given here. If the subject is they, we usually use light. They light a candle. Clear? Okay, now what is the past tense of lights or light? It is lit. Past participle is also lit. Okay, and present participle is lighting. Clear? Okay, now I will go for some other examples. Okay, basic words, basic verbs. Write. Okay, this is present form. For singular it will be writes. She writes a letter. She writes her exams. Okay, so write is present form. Past form is wrote. Past participle form is written. And of course present form, see to the present participle form, to the present form you have to only add ing form. So writing, I am not writing that. Okay. Then go. This is present form. For singular, see they go to temple. If it is plural you can write it as go only. If it is singular, she goes to temple. Okay. The child goes to the park. Clear? So for singular you have to add s or es for present form. Past tense it is went. Okay, present participle it is gone. So all these verbs, no, so whatever verbs I have written, you have many number of words like these, and these words are called as irregular words. Again, what is meant by an irregular verb? If a verb, see all these words are called as verb, no, because they denote action, they represent action. If a word denoting an action, okay, has different past form and past participle form, then that verb is called as irregular verb. In English again you have certain verbs like, see, talk. Okay, you have certain verbs like talk. This verb, the past tense, you can just write it as talked, and past participle is also talked. So now how have we got this past tense form and past participle form? Simply by adding ed. Clear? So words like this, that is like talk, okay, talk, learn, L-E-A-R-N, learn. So past tense of learn is learned, L-E-A-R-N-E-D. It also has learned, but you can also add ed. So whenever it is possible to add d or ed to a verb in order to change it into its past form or past participle form, we call that verb as regular verb. But if you see these verbs, no, like light, write, go, buy. Buy means buy, bought. Teach means taught and taught. Think means taught and taught. Draw, drew, drawn. Drink, drank, drunk. Drive, drove, driven. So all these verbs, no, their past tense form and past participle form are completely different from their present form. So when a verb has its past form and past participle form entirely different, we call those verbs as irregular verbs. Is it clear? But in case you are able to add d or ed to the verb, to the present form of the verb in order to change it into past form or past participle form, then we call those verbs as regular verbs. So this verb form table, you have more than 100 irregular verbs, ma. So all these past form and past participle form you should know. You would have learnt it in your lower classes, but you have to know them in order to change from active voice and passive voice. And this verb form will not only be useful for your active voice and passive voice, but also for transformation from direct speech to indirect speech. Okay. So the second thing you have to know is the different verb forms, at least or especially present form, past form and past participle form, because present participle we know it is very easy, we have to only add ing to the verb. Okay, so you should know these different verb forms. See, only certain examples I am able to give you here. As much as possible list of verb forms, that is irregular verb form table, we will send you through WhatsApp. Okay, so the second thing you have to know is verb form. Okay. Then, if you have noticed, there is another change also what I have done here. Is it clear? This lights, I have changed it into different thing. But how was I able to do that? This lights, what is the tense of this word lights? It is simple present tense. Clear? So, I should be able to identify tense. So first of all, I should be able to identify the different tenses. How many tenses are there in English? You have 12 tenses. Okay, so all the 12 tenses, see, only if I am able to identify that this word is in simple present form, I will be able to write the corresponding tense for the passive voice. So first of all, you should be able to identify the tense, and the second thing is, for the simple present, what is the corresponding answer, or what is the corresponding form for passive voice. So the changes in tenses also you should know. Clear? So this is the next thing you should know before you start or before you practice transforming a sentence from active to passive or passive to active. Okay, so you have another table, that is changes in tenses, that is a table. Clear? But now, as we are having online classes, I am just going to teach you tense wise only. We have, I told you 12 tenses we have, no? Only out of these 12 tenses, only 8 tenses have passive form. From these 8, today, how much ever possible, I am planning to cover all the present forms. So first we will concentrate on the present form. So as such, I am not going to give you the entire table. Maybe after completing all the tenses, towards the end I will give you all, I will summarize all the tenses. Is it clear? So the next thing you have to do is changes in tenses that you should know. And finally, the changes in pronoun. See, if you see in this sentence, what is a pronoun I told you? He is the pronoun. So when I have changed this he into its passive form, how have I changed? I have changed that he into him. So this change in pronoun you should know. Is it clear? So changes in pronouns also you should know. Is it clear? So pronouns, see, he is changed into him, no? So same way, she will be changed into her, by her. See, he lights a candle. Instead of he, if you had she lights a candle means, so when you write the answer, a candle is lit by her. Is it clear? The other pronoun, I, first person singular. Okay, first person singular, if you change it into passive voice, it becomes me. Clear? Then you have you. You, when you change it into passive form also, it is you only. What are the other pronouns? We have the pronoun we. When you change we into passive form, it becomes us. Is it clear? They, it becomes them. Okay, so subject pronouns, how many subject pronouns you have? I, he, she, you, we, they, and it is always it only. Okay, so he also, I'll write it here. He becomes him. So 7 subject pronouns you have. This you is for both singular and plural. So if you have in passive voice, she means, while you change it into passive form, it becomes her. Active voice, I becomes me in passive form. You is you only. Similarly, it is it only. But they becomes them, we becomes us, and he becomes him. Vice versa. In passive voice, if you have got this pronoun her, when you reverse it into active form, you should change it into she. Same way, if you have me, you should reverse it into I. Him means he, us means we, them means they. Clear? Not only in passive voice, in active voice also sometimes you may have these things. Okay, she teaches me. So she teaches me is active voice. Clear? See, she teaches me is active voice. So if you see the C, automatically when you change it into passive form, you are bringing this me to the front. So it should be changed into I. So if it is given as I, you change it into me. If it is given as me, you change it into I. Okay, so these are some of the things you have to remember when changing from active voice to passive voice. The first thing you should know is, you should know what is the subject, verb and object. That is, you should be able to pattern the given sentence into subject, verb and object. If there is no object in the sentence, or if the sentence cannot have object, then you cannot passivize this sentence. You can simply write the answer as no passive form, or the sentence cannot be passivized. So the first step is, you should be able to pattern the sentence into subject, verb and object. The second thing is verb form. Clear? For irregular verbs, the past form and past participle forms will be completely different. So those forms you should know, that verb form table you should know, and all these different forms you should know, then only you will be able to change from active voice to passive voice. Then tense, I told you, the final thing we changed is tense. So first of all, you should be able to identify what is the tense of the given sentence, whether the given sentence is in simple present or present continuous or present perfect or simple past. So these things you should be able to identify in first case. And secondly, the given tense, how it has to be changed into passive voice, that also you should know. So for that again we have a tabular column, that is changes in tense form, that also you should learn. And finally, the pronouns in the sentence, in the given sentences you will have pronouns, definitely at least one pronoun or two pronouns sometimes. So in active voice means if you are changing from active to passive, how you should change that pronoun you should know. If it is given as she, you should change it into her. If it is given as her, you should change it into she. So these are the 7 subject pronouns. You can just take down and you can remember them. Is it clear? So these are some of the things you should know. And when I spoke about this verb, you should also know about the auxiliary verbs. See, auxiliary verbs are nothing but helping verbs. So that also you should know. Clear? So finally I will write that also. Auxiliary verbs also you should know. So all these things if you know, then the transformation will be easy if you understand them properly. The remaining things I will continue in the next class. Thank you.